all the different sizes, shapes, colors, fabrics, textures of baggage that people can bring to a moment that will cause them to choose some version of pride over the truth of not knowing. Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And in today's story, well, it's an interesting story.
It is.
It's a story that I sat here with a very perplexed look on my face, wondering where it was going.
It was a smirk.
It was more than a smirk. But where we ended up getting to was some really interesting stuff around overcoming hardwired obstacles and vulnerabilities around things like asking for help and failure and embarrassment. And when it's important enough to do that, and actually what is the importance of doing that, and what it has to do with company culture and leadership. And lots of other stuff. Yeah. So I'll just leave it at that. I so badly want to tip the hat on what the story is about, but I'm not going to ruin the surprise. So you will want to stick around. But before we do that, before Elliot tells his story, I do want to welcome all the new people we have in the Facebook group. So there's Chris Mullett and Matt Culati, Alice Daly, Joey Byrne, and John Amato are all new to the group. So we've had some interesting conversations in there the last couple of days. So hop on in. You can find out how to get there from going to sohere'smystory.com, where you can listen to the latest episodes or join the Facebook group. See you there.
You ready?
Yep.
So here's my story. I was in one of those hands-on museums. It wasn't the Maryland Science Center, but it was something akin to that. And I was looking around. The kids were there, so this was a number of years ago. And I saw this display in the back, and it was kind of shielded from everything else. In other words, there was
like the don't touch zone of the touch.
No, it was not that. It was the don't watch zone.
Oh.
So you had this pedestal, the kind that you would put a sculpture on or something like that.
Yep.
And there was the 3-section like blinder thing around it. Mm-hmm. So it was clearly meant to shield this off, but it wasn't like under construction, or it wasn't a don't go there zone or anything like that. So I went there. So I went behind it, and what was on the pedestal was a chrome arm with a hook, and hanging.
It's like an arm, okay.
No, like a metal, just a metal arm.
So not like a fake hand, not like a fake arm. Okay, no. Gotcha.
So it was just a chrome metal stand with a hook.
Okay.
And hanging off the hook was a flesh-colored scrotum.
Oh. Okay.
Like
so ever since you started your story, I've been trying to anticipate where this is headed. Yes. And I will say that was not on my list.
It's not on your list. So polyurethane, and of course it had two realistic looking testicles in there. And then there was a display. And what the display said was, this was there to teach men how to self-examine for testicular cancer.
Oh, okay.
And so what they did was and the display said this. One of the testicles had what would be a lump. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it said it felt like it would feel like a grain of sand.
Okay.
And so the whole purpose was to say what you're looking for, if you're doing a self-exam, what you're looking for. And nobody had ever mentioned anything to me. I mean, I had certainly heard of testicular cancer, if nothing else from the Lance Armstrong saga, but I hadn't seen this. And so basically what the display was saying, can you find the cancer? Right. So now I'm standing in front of this display.
By the way, I'm being so grown up about this story. Are you impressed?
Well, I'm only pseudo-impressed, and I'll tell you why I'm only pseudo-impressed. I'm pseudo-impressed because I can see the expression on your face.
Yeah, I'm like, just finish the story.
Yeah. So I go against decades of just ingrained, hardwired, raising as a boy in our society. And I tried to find, so I'm fondling these polyurethane testicles. Sure. And I'm trying to find the cancer, the lump, the grain of sand that they're talking about. And by the way, I do not think that fondling polyurethane testicles should be the title of this episode, but it did occur to me as I was saying that. But anyway, and I couldn't find it. I could not locate this. So then, of course, the last thing on this display said, if you can't find it, ask for help. Okay. So now,
can I get some help over by the testicles?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I've already overcome, it's like a quest. I've overcome the first obstacle, which is actually going over to see what has blinders around it. And that's not much of an obstacle. But then upon seeing it, I read the thing, and instead of just kind of laughing or smiling or nodding and walking away, I actually reach out my hand to
fondle the testicles.
Mm-hmm. And boy, that is not the snippet that I want anybody to take from this episode. And then I can't find this grain of sand. And I actually recognize the importance of it. You know, that's the easy part. You can recognize the importance of it.
Sure.
So now I have to go through this final test. Do I actually go and ask the, 25-year-old female attendant over there for help in locating the grain of sand on the polyurethane testicles? Mm-hmm. So I do. Mm-hmm. I go over and I said, look, I was over there. And she goes, much like your expression was as I was telling the story, yes. And I said, so I tried it. I can't locate it. Can you help me? And she goes, really?
Oh, that's interesting.
And I said, is it that easy? Because I didn't know. I thought that she was just saying, really, like you really couldn't find it. You couldn't. And she goes, we've had this up and we actually talk about this display, I guess the team, whatever. And we were wondering, nobody's ever asked.
Nobody's ever asked for help.
Nobody's ever asked for help. And she said, it's really difficult to find. And we don't even know how many people, because it's screened up, we don't even know how many people try it. We don't think many people try it, but nobody actually asked for help. And so she came back and she did. And I had to get over this smirk factor and all that stuff. And she did. And I was like, oh, okay. That's it. And it's like a grain of sand and I couldn't, whatever. And I actually left there very glad that I asked for help, having gotten over this mortifying experience for me, in this thing. But anyway, I just thought it was an interesting experience for me because, and I know that quite a few parallels in business, but I just find lately,
I am actually dying to know what parallel you see.
Well, because what I see is, and I've been finding this so much lately, which is why the story came to mind, that I've run into so many people who felt so embarrassed to even venture a question about certain things. I would say that they felt they should know, but that's unfair because I'm not even sure if that's the baggage. But whatever baggage they came to this place with, they felt they couldn't ask, and they were relieved if I explained it without making them ask. And that's what came to mind. And I thought about this story. So that's my story. Well,
so many things I'd like to say. But interestingly, just, from a female perspective, I find it fascinating because if that was a breast cancer display, I wouldn't think twice about touching it.
Really?
Yeah. So what I do not share is the sort of, not that you're actually sexualizing it, but the fact that what came up for you was like after years of, never wanting to touch another man's testicles, it just wouldn't occur to me. So I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that says more about me or if it does like a male-female thing, but that is relevant because that is actually the whole point to this is that, some people would stop at there's a barrier around the thing and they wouldn't go back there. Like I have some friends who are just very rule followery kinds of people. And it's not a bad thing. They're just like, they will only cross streets at the crosswalk. Yeah. They just always follow all the rules everywhere. And they may have actually, and I don't know what the setup was, but the way you were describing it originally, I know some people who wouldn't go back there and look because they would just assume that it was a don't go here area.
One of my sons actually was saying, "Are you allowed to go back there?"
Right.
When he saw me go back. So yeah.
Right. So you go back there and then you encountered a layer of obstacle that actually I wouldn't have potentially.
Right.
Maybe not. I don't know because I would have, I think, at least I'm guessing, would have just seen it as a display. Like, I don't think I would have encountered the same kind of like, weirdness that you were feeling.
I don't think, and it would be interesting to know, but I don't think I'm the only man that, and I mean this seriously,
probably not,
that would have that initial, oh my, just that, that hesitation. I'm betting I'd love to hear our listeners chime in if they're brave enough. I'm sure it is,
but what I love about that example is that there are like multiple layers here of how different people have different reactions to different kinds of obstacles and stimuli. And then you get down to the really interesting one where you've overcome all of those. And then it's asking for help, which is wrapping someone else into your vulnerable and peculiar, awkward moment to ask for, like, can you ask for help in a moment that was already feeling a little weird?
Well, they put up those barriers because they knew you'd feel weird.
Right.
And so now you have to basically take off the barriers.
Well, and it's like saying, yeah, so I was in the awkward place. Like I went in there and I did the thing and now I need help.
And I wasn't able to do the thing. I tried,
which is
but I was not successful because I didn't know and I couldn't find what maybe other people could.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to ask someone. And here's the other part of it. Not only did I have to wrap somebody else in, but from a demographic point of view, I'm an older man and let's be serious, that's my equipment in there.
Right.
So,
understood.
So now I have to ask a younger woman for help with it. So
what I love about this story, and I was like hardcore giggling the whole time you were telling me, but what I love about it is the inescapable light it shines on the role of, whether you want to call it embarrassment or shame or awkwardness, and how much of a barrier that is. Like you cruised past these other barriers, but that's the one that I think gave you the biggest pause. And what I love about that is the number of times that you make it hard for people to ask for help or to have a problem and admit it. I worked with a client for years and years and years. And I just always thought he was very private about the financials of his company, because I absolutely have those clients. I have a client who would not discuss, and we talked about very private things about his business and really vulnerable in the weeds stuff, but he would never, ever, ever talk about dollars with me. And I would even joke with him. I was like, okay, if we think of it as lima beans, if your company brings in 100 lima beans, how many lima beans go to expenses? He's like, stop it. So I always thought this particular other client of mine was just very private about money. And then there came this day where he said to me, he was like, I have a really embarrassing admission. I don't really understand financial statements. He's like, I kind of do. He goes, I get the basics. I get the very basics. He goes, and I pretty much get the P&L, but I don't really truly understand the balance sheet. And every month I look at it and I'm like, okay. He's like, I know what to look for to be like, oh, that's a problem. He's like, but I don't really understand it. And
that's a big club, by the way.
It's a huge club. It's now a question that I ask more directly, just, in hopes to kind of get in front of that. But, that's a really, really hard thing. And here's the crazy thing about it. If you've gone a certain amount of distance, and let's say you're now running a company, the higher the stakes get, the bigger the admission that you don't know something it feels. And the more of an obstacle that is. And the more I think people try and kind of hobble along, because you could have just as easily chosen to not go ask that person and just walk away.
I could have. And that's true. But I felt that there were big stakes because this is not something
because I can't find it. So
right, if it was like, can you solve the Rubik's Cube? Right. I'm not good at Rubik's Cubes, but I don't have a lot of emotion invested in the Rubik's Cube. But here, there was big stakes. So this made sense to me.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's that tipping point where you actually have to say, well, it makes enough sense to me that I'm going to have to ask. But in your example with somebody with financial statements, the more accomplished you get, there is, I don't know if this is just a me thing or a male-female thing or just whatever, but there's a lot of ego.
Oh, yeah.
And so you have Oh, when I was growing up, one of the things, because I always had little companies and things, even in high school and stuff, and it's, oh, he's really good at business. He's really good at business. Well, the more success you enjoy, or the more you hear that and you start reading your own press releases, the more difficult it is to say, hey, I don't know something that you might think is super basic about business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. It kind of comes back to the stakes. The higher the stakes of your ego, I don't think it's a male-female thing. I mean, I definitely think it obviously has, there's a story there around like male ego that for sure is I like to be the guy in the room that knows. I sometimes actually think it shows up even more so for women because they don't want to be the woman who doesn't know. I think
right. Okay. I can see that.
It reminds me of a time that I used to do this workout class. It was a TRX class at a gym right here in town with 3 business owners. One was my client, and he invited me because he knew that I would enjoy this class. And there were 3 other guys that attended this. So it's 4 guys and me, all of them business owners, all of them people I respect. And I attend this class. And, while I knew I wouldn't be able to do everything they did because they've been taking the class longer, I was determined not to be, and I'm making air quotes, like the chick that couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
And so I did everything they did. And I almost couldn't walk for like a week. It was because it was a brand new kind of exercise. Yeah. And it was actually really funny. My biceps tightened up so much that for a few days, I literally couldn't straighten my arm out the whole way until those muscles. Yeah. So I don't advise that. But I do think that sometimes we could spend this entire time just talking about all the layers that you said baggage earlier, all the different sizes, shapes, colors, fabrics, textures of baggage that people can bring to a moment that will cause them to choose some version of pride over the truth of not knowing.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a really, really dangerous place in business because you ask people a question and they will answer it, whether or not they know the answer. And I personally think that being more comfortable with I don't know is a really, really important leadership skill. But it's one that's 2 things. One, I think it's overlooked because it's scary and it feels like vulnerability and risk. But I also think that there's sometimes a almost cruel intolerance where people look at leaders and expect them to know everything and have everything thought out. I sometimes talk to teams and I'm like, well, why did they do that? Did they not even, not realize? I'm like, do you really expect them to get everything? It's kind of the way your kids sometimes think that you know everything and that you're always going to do things perfectly. And that's just not the case.
Well, but if you look at the dynamic of how people, or the structure of how people become leaders, you start out with, at the very first step, you start out with a job interview and a resume where you're basically presenting super competence in this particular area and confidence in your ability to do the job and return value, et cetera. And at each step in the organization, depending upon how that organization works and is structured, the goal is to project competence and more than that to move to the next level.
See, that's where I will buck them because I don't think that is truly the goal. I mean, if you don't know something, there should be a lot of confidence in you. There's a much more core version of confidence to be confident enough to say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, or I will get someone who does, or let's bring in this expert. Like being able to. There's like faux confidence. And then the most confident leaders I know actually are not afraid to say they don't know.
And that's fine if that's reflected in the culture of the company.
Fair enough.
But if the company, if it's a hyper competitive company, and I'll grant you that I come at this from a hyper-competitive industry, especially if you're in large firms or even the boutique firms that are very competitive. Who's going to make partner? You don't. A lot of times, the art of the considered response is lost because you've got to be the person who knows, who's the go-to, who can take the ball, give me the ball. I've got, and you move forward.
I get it. I get it. I'm not saying that it doesn't take a lot of courage, but that's maybe the whole point. It takes a lot of courage. And that's why I think it's such an important skill. Because think of it as if your surgeon. If your surgeon doesn't know what they're doing, I don't want them faking it because they want to look
Probably
good
true,
to the
yes.
teams. Like, I'm sure I can figure that out. I've never done it, but I'll figure it out. Now, to be fair, a huge portion of my early career was founded on just assuming that I would be able to figure things out as I went. A lot of times I was doing jobs that were well beyond my, training or previous experience. So I'm not suggesting, I want to be really clear. I'm not saying when you don't know to just be like, sorry, I don't know. But I do think the other side of that can be really dangerous if it feels like leadership equals always knowing. One of our first episodes was actually on this, the value of leadership equaling not knowing.
No, that
sometimes.
And that's true. But I guess where I come to is that many times people have garnered the confidence they need to admit that they don't know something right away or to be comfortable with their vulnerability, but after hard-fought year of experience. But I think what's often lost is giving people space at a very young age in the company, new in their profession to not know.
Yep. Well, and so I want to back up exactly back to kind of that path. If you think about your original story, you were in this little alcove of an area, right, where other people couldn't see you. Now, forget whether or not this was technologically possible, but imagine for just a second if in there, right at that little sign where it says, if you can't find it, ask for help. If there was actually almost like the airplane button you could hit, so the signal went off somewhere, so that you didn't have to leave that space, you didn't have to go find someone, talk to them, decide which person, that you could just hit a button and someone would join you in the little space and discreetly give you the guidance that you needed. That would have would have eased the embarrassment of you having to go seek someone out, explain, hi, I was just with the testicles, and right? Because you had to say you had to present your issue, which just because they said no one had asked a question.
Yeah.
I have to assume I can think of about 10 ways they could have made that easier to ask for help. And by easier, I don't mean simpler. I mean less confronting and less embarrassing and less full of all the stuff that comes into somebody's mind to make it a little simpler.
No, they definitely could have reduced the embarrassment factor. And I'm not faulting them because I think there's a certain level of technological know-how and setup.
No, but just using it as
they could have given more. They could have raised the possibilities that people would be comfortable asking for help, because there are definitely ways to do that. And you're right, even making that walk.
Yes.
It gives you this big cooling off period where you can say, it's just not worth
never
it.
mind. Let's go get a hot dog.
Let's go get a hot dog, whatever it is. But
and I'll just add to that, even if on the sign under ask for help, they say, we know it might seem weird, but it's okay. Or, it's to even acknowledge, sometimes even just acknowledging the weirdness of it.
To be fair, that they did.
Okay.
The sign was actually written in a way, it was not like this technical thing. It was saying, basically, if I remember correctly, something along those lines. We know it's weird, but it could save your life. We know it's difficult, but it could save your life. So they did acknowledge, and to be fair, they acknowledged it by putting up that partition, so you're not, so you did have some sort of
right, privacy. Because if that was out in the open, the chances that anyone would have even tried would have probably gone downhill. So this is interesting. I worked with a company. I was doing some culture dynamics with a company who had just bought several other companies. And it was so interesting because one of the companies that they had acquired had this really unique culture that they were having some trouble assimilating into this larger company. They were just feeling a little out of step and whatnot. And so I was asking them what felt so distinct about it, and what are you feeling out of step with now and whatnot. And several of the people said, well, it might sound like a weird thing, but we just had this really strong culture of embracing failure. And I said, well, what does that what does that mean? Like in what way? Like yay, failure. And they're like, no, you laugh, but we wanted people to be innovative, and you can't ask people to be innovative if it's not okay to fail.
Absolutely.
And I said, so how did they make it okay to fail? And the one guy said, our CEO, he said, I know this is going to sound really contrived and over the top, but our CEO, they would have weekly, like town hall meetings that were virtual because their company was kind of dispersed. And there were these weekly meetings where they would be going over numbers and KPIs and events and all this kind of stuff. And he said, and it didn't always happen every single week because sometimes there wasn't something, but almost every single week, certainly once or twice a month, he would intentionally highlight and praise someone who had failed at something, often something quite big. And he gave me an example. He's like, somebody had, and I forget the exact details of it, had really screwed up a client order of some kind or something. And there were actually some pretty significant, it's an industry where it's not just like, oh, your copier doesn't get delivered. Like there can actually be some like danger, risk kinds of things. And he had screwed up this order, and he had immediately brought it to the attention of everyone, which allowed the whole company to like step in, mitigate the danger, risk, communicate with the client, clean, actually walk back some of it. They couldn't clean it all up without the client knowing, but they were able to, to get in front of it and minimize the damage, wrap the client in. And so they made the best of a good situation. And so the CEO was praising this guy. I think they even did bonuses sometimes on this, like, you brought a failure to our attention. Yeah. Because otherwise, if that's not an okay thing, your inclination, at least initially, you might, much like your story, you might decide to get over it, but your inclination is like, can I cover this up? Can I try and fix it on my own first? And even if he tried to fix it on his own for a day or two and then alerted them, they wouldn't have been able to make as good of a thing about it. So he said, we literally celebrate failure. And that kind of intentional, you were talking about the culture and it being okay to ask for help. I've never seen as good of an example as that of truly intentionally and with great consciousness baking into a culture that it's okay to fail or not know or ask for help or any of those other things that can feel really vulnerable in business. No,
and I think that's really the art of it. I think that it's great, as we had discussed in an earlier episode, when a leader can admit that he or she doesn't know or find some place to go for help or not feel that they have to fake it till they make it or whatever trite expression you want to use. But to me, the best part is when somebody who, doesn't have their name on the door, let alone on the wall or whatever, also feels free to ask for help. I think that's the sign of a company that's got legs under it. So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.